Hello everyone, it's Mike Levin on Sunday, September 17th, 2017. I am here in Clove Lake Park, Staten Island, New York City, that fifth borough. And I dropped Addie off at Hebrew school, her first day of Hebrew school, yay! So I had the strangest decisions to make about this weekend because life is starting to layer on fast, and the place in Inwood, yay, has sold, and closing's coming up, and I have various things to do in preparation for that. And today was one of those days to do those things. And so I had the option of dropping Addie off Saturday night and let Rachel do that first day of Hebrew school, and she was giving me the chance, and I was like, you know what, I can find ways, you know. Addie is only going to be going through each of these milestones once. And with a situation such as it is, when I have an opportunity to be part of one of these things, take it. And so I took it, and so I'm using that opportunity to walk around, literally around Clove Lake, and I'm here at some sort of, I guess, bridge in the middle of it. And I thought I'd take the opportunity to break in my Note 8 phone, which is what I'm doing this, my first real selfie video on. And I don't have one of those flip case things, which is what really made it easy to hold on to when I was on the Note 3, where the back cleverly melded into a case that went around to the front. The Note 3 was an inspired Android phone design, and it took me until then to really jump onto the Note platform, but before I ran into someone, a friend, who said, Mike, this stylus is high quality, this is the S Pen. And then he proceeded to take out his Note. He was on the 2. This was Ike from 360i, one of the artists and graphic designers there, Ike Trulio, and he proceeded to put on the symmetry in Autodesk's Sketch Pro and start sketching out like a wolf head tattoo right there in front of me, and I was like, whoa, this is like Wacom tablet stuff you're doing, that's high quality. And he's like, yeah, this is really good. So I went out and got the Note 3. It was my first Android phone. I had Android before, as I figured it was necessary to do just for being in the field of search engine optimization. I need to have also been an Android person. I always also need to be an Android person. So I got the Google Nexus 7 tablet when it first came out, one of those first tablet, entries, I guess Android competitors to iPads is how you would think of them, and they were up there, they were 500, 600, I forget what I spent, but they were, on the order of several hundreds of dollars, and things have really changed. I've got a couple of Kindle HD Fires in circulation, one for me, one for Addie. I got them on Prime Day. Mine was $50, Addie's was $70, and I installed Google services on there, activated the Google Play Store, and I cannot believe the value that I'm getting out of these things. And that is indeed also the opinion that was expressed in editorials by my employer. So I find myself in the position where I am in kind of like spiritual and intellectual alignment with the people who pay me to do my work. And I have not had this feeling since Commodore. Commodore computers is my background. I'm one of those suburban kids who lucked out to working in the halls of that company who brought us the home computer industry. And I've been engaged in these like little debates online and comments and stuff about how much credit Commodore can take for the modern shape of computing. And my contention is, and it's been argued against by some pretty hard hitters, heavy hitters, whatever the expression is, that the ARM processor, which absolutely is the outgrowth of Acorn computers, who was looking for a better, faster, cheaper CPU that would take the place of other things out there. Now, what's the other things out there? Who were they competing against when Acorn of the UK, kind of like the Commodore of the UK, when they decided we do not want to be yet another one of those companies beholden to Moss Technologies in Norristown, Pennsylvania, where worked Chuck Peddle, the creator of the 6502 CPU, register-based RISC processor of its day, where you got for $25 what the nearest competitors could only offer you at $250, a times 10 cost reduction in, cost of computing, home computer industry, that created directly a number of things that were based on the Moss Technologies 6502, which was actually in turn a kind of, reverse engineering, black box, clone of a Motorola processor. It was not the 68,000 by that time. I think it was the 6800. So there was the 6800 chip, which was in the several hundreds of dollars, at least, $250, $300. So it's that same times 10, rate. So this hardware engineer, Chuck Peddle, said, you know what? I bet I can bring all those same machine instructions to the computer user by just reducing all the amount of metal it takes to get there, less metal. Favoring a register system where there's just a few registers for moving memory around, calculating and briefly recording the results of calculation before it gets shuttled off to memory in some other location on your system where it's better for long-term storage. But it's that really short-term storage stuff that the CPU that makes decisions has access to, direct access to. In reduced instruction sets, it's just a few places. In complex instruction sets, it's these long lookup tables of if you hear this set of bits, do this set of instructions, complex instructions. So that was the fundamental split in computing back in those days, with complex instruction set chips winning. What we know today as the Freescale line of computers, which are the, descendants of the Motorola 6800 and then 68,000 lineage of computing. So that's in a few things, a few weird outliers that are still around. And I think it has a lot of supercomputer and AI and possibly server, usages, where the other lineage, the 68X, it's hard to even think what they call it, but it's Intel and all the people who have, copied that, like, AMD, those instructions that come from the IBM PC lineage of computing. And that's what's in most things today that we know as desktop computers, things that run Windows or Mac OS, are usually 286, 386, x86, then Pentium, and then whatever it is today, these multi-core, things that run Windows 10, things like tablets and stuff. Rarely phones. When you get down to the phone size, what you're talking about is ARM processors, things based on those original designs by the Commodore of the UK, who, when they realized they couldn't particularly stay in that game of doing hardware and selling it in sufficient quantities to remain a company, decided to get into the intellectual property and licensing game and say, we have a bunch of reduced instruction set processors, CPU designs, machine instructions that you can just use how you like. Here's the machine instructions, which is one set of intellectual property that can be licensed separate from here's a bunch of designs you can implement in the hardware today in your fab plants. And you too can be making your own Snapdragon or whatever these different names are that we know as the processors that are in, usually Android based phones, but also in Apple phones. Now the interesting thing is that Apple no longer licenses these ARM designs, these ARM hardware designs, things like Cortex. If you hear the term, ARM Cortex, that means that's a particular processor design that was created by ARM, the spin-off company from Acorn. And this is a place where I have contentions with people. It's really interesting because I proclaim that when ARM got created, when ARM was created, it was, as the press releases attest to that are still out there, a collaboration between Acorn, who had the ARM CPU designs, VLSI, which is a company that fabricated things. They're a real fab plant that also had design capabilities, and they played a pretty significant role in those early days in bringing, hardware concepts to life. And Apple, yes, Apple is the third leg of the ARM partnership, and it was even used in the Newton. I mean, the ARM designs popped up here and there when people needed that kind of stuff, which happens. Embedded systems with very low power footprint requirements took this stuff. So there are a few designs out there that could be used, but because ARM was a commercial company and it wasn't just open source, I believe there was an MIT MIPS design there that a lot of this stuff was inspired from in the first place anyway. That later I think became the MIPS company and was a whole lineage of processors right there, but separate story. ARM offered, I'm sure, support and all the stuff you need when you're basing a commercial product on something, someone else's neck on the line, that all this stuff is going to work for you. So that is why ARM was in some early stuff. But then along came the Apple Newton, which was interesting. I think that was under John Scully, the PepsiCo CEO, who took over Apple there for a while when Steve Jobs was booted. And so they dug into their, all the assets and said, hey, we can use this processor that's been around a while in the obscure embedded system shadows, and we can use that as the heart that powers this thing. And along comes iPhone, right? A long time later. The Palm Pilot has come and gone, probably ARM based, I wouldn't be surprised. But Apple sees the world has an appetite for this kind of like little touchscreen thing, but not really a touchscreen. If you just got rid of the stylus, made it color, and had flashy graphics, the world would gobble this stuff up, make it a positive experience, control that experience as much as possible. Don't even have installable apps in the first version. The world has changed. I mean, just think about that. The depth of Steve Jobs' brilliance when he came back to Apple and to base all this thing on a common Unix kernel. I think it's the Mach derivative of the Unix kernel that goes back to those AT&T and Berkeley Unix days. So to have the lineage of today's Apple equipment deeply rooted in the most hardcore computer science people out there, and then to deliver Apple build quality on the hardware, it was, Steve Jobs just pulled off, modern technology miracle, to the point of which Bill Gates is still in competition. And they've done a few interesting plays, and every once in a while you have to say, and Microsoft, because yes, they're always still in the game. Don't count out Microsoft. They're merely becoming like an IBM, and look at what IBM is today. So you achieve that, mega company status. Yeah, I don't even know how to get back to the temple. I will try this way, I think. And then I'll probably wind up the video and walk my way back, because this has been a little Staten Island adventure, looking around for maybe for sale or for rent signs. I wouldn't mind being close to the temple when I move out here. This is an exploratory mission. So I'll wrap all this stuff up here. I've been all over the place, but I guess I was saying that ARM processors, I contend, are here because Apple, among other companies, including Acorn, needed to break the reliance that they had on Commodore, their own competitor, who was also very successful in end product, deeply vertically integrated product sales. No one can compete with you if you do bring out the Commodore 64 and is the source of the CPU that everyone needs in that $500 home computer arena, because as soon as you add either a Motorola or an Intel chip, that thing is going to start at $1,000, because the CPU itself is going to be 300 of them. Whew. And that was the Amiga and the PC, the rise of the personal computer. When you say it's a difference between the home computer and the personal computer, home computers were generally powered by the 6802 and the 68010 chips from MOS, which Commodore ended up owning, or the soon to come ARM processor, but only from Acorn, and Z80, Zilog, you know, the cheap version of the 68,000 of the x86 lineage. So the Zilog is the cheap version of the x86 lineage, the way the 6502 is the cheap version of the Motorola 6800, 68,000 lineage, or 6800. That would have been an alternative reality had MOS and Commodore continued with the leapfrogging one-zone technology that had actually gotten started and been underway. There was a Commodore 65 designed that you can still see on eBay once in a while, because there's prototypes out there. That was killed because it would have competed with the Amiga, which was from the Atari engineers. And there's just so much interesting history there, and that's a part of the story I want to tell as I continue my walking around videos, as I figure out a way to alleviate this this ARM fatigue issue. So Manor Road, I do believe I am close, because I take Manor Road to get here. So, wrapping it up, look forward to more videos like this, where I mostly really just open-ended ramble. I'll be here. This is going to be the new scenery for people who tune in to me. Prepare for less Inwood and more Staten Island. Be a Staten Island guy in a matter of weeks, I expect, and that will certainly change the texture of my life right along with this new Note 8. So it's a double thing: moving where I live, moving how I interact with the world from the Apple platform. Still in my pocket, still really my main phone at the moment. I like my little Apple jewelry tiny phone. There's a phone in there, and my 2001 Space Odyssey monolith that I carry in my pocket now, that actually seems to have as much technology and intelligence in it as that, you know, portal doorway thing had. I don't think that portal system needed the processing power that's included in this thing. And then that stylus, man, I am gonna get back into drawing, let me tell you. In my initial exercise is to ask myself, can I start to think visually again without writing out every word, which is no different from using the type-in text thumb keyboards. So there it is. If I can start drawing pictures and thinking visually, symbolically, not encoding everything to the limited realm of words and the English language, I think I will be able to communicate better and make my ramblings more appealing. I think I am in search of becoming a YouTube thumbnail artist, because these things, which in one form will almost always be drawing out these pictures, in another form will be highly clickable YouTube thumbnails. And bam, I start to draw together my interest in illustration, my interest in technology, my interest in marketing and search engine optimization, and my interest in coding and programming. All of these things come into play in projects that I do suspect are as interesting to anyone out there listening, still listening. My viewership is what, like nearly 7,000 subscribers on YouTube? What are you people thinking following me? I don't edit my videos. I say what's on my mind. I always have lots of things on my mind on multiple fronts. And I'm fighting off existentialist funk because I always question who are we in the universe, and have to come back to the thought that the answer is probably rare, and in rarity is value. The more scarce something is, the more in demand it is. So God help us if we ever make contact. Really, maybe God may have to help us if we ever make contact. We need to have at least spread out in the local galaxy across a few more arms of this Milky Way than this tiny one. You know, the game of life is probably pretty obvious when you think about it. Let rarity propagate without excessively propagating and throwing off this beautiful system that can create rarity. Achieve an equilibrium where interesting things can exist in the universe without wiping each other out every time that they frequently come into contact. So, make them come into contact less. Rig the game so that they will probably never in their entire existence run into another like it, because believe me, you would not like to. Show me one instance when ... So, you know, the matter, the stuff that all congeals, and the way it clumps up, and the way it interacts and becomes time, time and space continuum, whatever. Einstein, what is the fourth dimension, spatial or time? I don't know, but you know, ask yourself those questions and comprehend the system about as much as a human can. I mean, if you're not going to be a scientist like doing this stuff for a living, you don't really have to specialize your whole life on being some sort of super scientist or mathematician mapping it all out. Leave that to the people for whom that is a passion. But you should still be able to understand and appreciate those stories when they're told. Get the inside jokes, even if they refer to quantum physics, quantum effects. Understand more jokes from Rick and Morty. Watch Rick and Morty and get over it. And all that stuff. So, like, love me my media. I'll probably comment on media more. I love that the Rick and Morty universe and the Gravity Falls universe are one and the same, or shall I say multiverse? Yeah, always say multiverse. And that Addie, my daughter, gets that stuff, and her head is right there with these writers like Alex Hirsch, these masterful storytellers where creations like that pop up here and there every once in a while and become thought-provoking and become part of the fabric of your youth. And I was right there for Addie through several of those phases. And as she gets older and goes from 6 to 7 and becomes like 12, she'll like have less of that reliance and that need and desire to hang out with old dad. So take advantage of it. Yet here I am walking around here while she's in her first day of Hebrew school. It's still only about an hour and a half in, and here I am thinking to myself, do I hover and cramp her style, or do I let her feel her independence? If some emergency comes up, they gotta call me. But my phone is on, my cellular's connected. I've got my Wi-Fi, which I know because when I surf on my Apple phone. Haven't switched SIM cards yet. I like this as phone. I like Note 8 as something else. So basically, I got to finance this expensive phone through T-Mobile's upgrade offer. I qualified. I've had my Apple phone for long enough under their thing, so I got this for about $300 up front, and the rest of it over time is part of my phone bill, so my phone bill goes up by a little. I'll take it for this amazing device, which lets me bring together, believe it or not, through being able to terminal serve in to work computers, my coding and creating shortcuts, creating Bash and Python and all these amazing ways that I have been longing to connect the dots. I do it now. And drawing, that stylus is really something. If you haven't experienced the Note 8 stylus, check it out. And the style of the Note 8 for notes, it is so self-referential and meta. It's a meta experience. The design is completely unopinionated. The color is, if it's the black design, almost a complete uninterrupted, squared off yet rectangular, perfectly Apple design, let me tell you. So if Samsung ever got slapped down for imposing on Apple's rounded corner designs, Samsung got back at Apple with the Note 8, because you put together the highly opinionated design, opinionated in every way, right down to the way that screen takes that dip around sensors. Design of the Apple X, and you put it down next to the unopinionated, generic, black, rounded, rectangular, you know, smoothed off, almost cylinder corners, nearly seamless, but for the button piece of glass in your hand design. That is the Note 8. Samsung got the last laugh, Apple. Sorry to break it to you, but you know, sometimes you gotta rein in that kook in favor of generic, you know, nothing wrong with it. Unassailable. Check out that Note 8, the unassailable phone of, I guess, 2017. 2017 Note 8. Thanks for coming back. I thought an S Pen experience was out of my life. Bad timing. And it's back. It's like the Amiga came back. And then you use software like ArtRage and you're like, yeah, it's like the Amiga came back for sure. The Amiga came back in the form of the Note 8, at least in my heart. I know I can do all this multitasking nonsense like 2 apps up front, but really, I'm not going to do that. Multitasking wasn't what it was about for me on the Amiga, though it was cool, and I actually did AREX process automation with Art Department Pro. I could diverge on so many tangents, and I will on other videos. But rounding it back in, I love the Amiga on nearly every front, but it crashed and it crashed and it crashed and it crashed, and it undermined my credibility as a user of that platform. You, who you are, your identity is wrapped up in the platform you choose. JavaScript people, I'm talking to you, but I'm talking to everybody. Java people, Python people, we have our own problems, okay? I admit it. It's not a perfect land. It's just that it's Netherlandish. I hope I have that right. Yeah, Linux is from Flanders and Python is from the Netherlands. I hope I have that right. Or Dutch. It's from Denmark. Dane. The Dane solution, the Dane way of thinking about it is, and apologies to all you Benelux and Scandinavia. Okay, there's a whole mix of countries up there that you know, are not really all Scandinavia, but their names sound like it, and I get them confused. And they invented a lot of technology too between them. But the Dane way of thinking about it is, you will probably never achieve perfection, but let's import anti-gravity in the meantime. Batteries included. Everyone did it at least once, probably 2 or 3 times in whatever your domain or area or field or career or use or hobby or interest or kink may happen to be. There's Python libraries for it, probably 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and sometimes the hardest process is narrowing them down. And after having the carpet torn out from under me on the Coleco Atom and then the Commodore Amiga and then Windows Active Server page and Apple and the iPhone, Android and the Note 8 platform is becoming of very great interest. as are those other underlying techs that are the plumbing of technology, which is generic Linux, generic server Linux. Connect in through a terminal or secure shell to a serial type connection. It's emulating a teletype machine that were over serial connections. It sent bits back and forth that only just barely managed to be full screen text because of clever terminals that knew how to interpret bits and turn them into alphanumeric characters somewhere on the screen. That's what a lot of this stuff is emulating. When you're like, what is that terminal on the Macintosh? That's what that is. That's the old school way of connecting to computers. And it's not even the oldest school way, it's just the oldest school that is still kind of usable by information technology samurai warriors who would rather control things at that level than at these other interface click and drag levels, because that is time sensitive and fragile. Your knowledge and information and control and ability to automate and stability of your automations long term is brittle when you rely on graphical user interfaces. Even APIs have their problem, but you can't get away from APIs. But once you accept that you're working through abstracted interfaces to other things and that there's layers that deny you the direct access to what's really going on down there in the metal, you've accepted the handcuffs in order to have really, really fast responses to your requests. Almost as if you were hitting the hardware underlying, but only going through the approved application programming interface. As soon as you accept that the API world is here to stay with us, all you need is script control of it and making sure that those scripts run under super excellent context. Maybe they're compiled, so they're still scripts, but they're compiled into bytecode for that machine or some variation thereof. Maybe even binary executable dropped directly onto the hardware. Less and less these days, but it still happens. Drivers, operating systems and such, games, 3D rendering engines. And then everything else uses these super simplified abstraction levels that are simplified in just the right way to appeal to the people in the field using those APIs. APIs have to be designed for the people using them. Python is designed for the people using it. The language itself is an API architecture, blueprint, model, design, self-referential example, what have you. Python has a lot of APIs. Even just to basic objects like what they call lists and dictionaries and tuples. And it's different than other languages. It's very opinionated. Python is not the unopinionated Note 8 design Samsung Note 8, which is unopinionated. Python is highly opinionated. There is a Pythonic way of doing things. There are Python-like APIs, and it's certainly not Java, and it's certainly not JavaScript. And all the other languages I could list through. Ruby's quite elegant, and there are elegant API language designs out there. But what happens with Python is that elegance couples on up with 25 years of continuously, linearly building momentum. Look at any study, and there's a lot of them out there. The GitHub usage, the searches on Google. There's all kinds of ways to measure things, and JavaScript will almost always reign supreme because you have to categorize the code you're scoring the relevance or importance of, and almost every project has JavaScript in it one way or another. It's PostScript. It's the built-in display user interface language of tech, and it is part of the plumbing. JavaScript is worth knowing, it's worth doing, it's worth being able to take advantage of the latest greatest JavaScript libraries, which do have simplified APIs, you see. JavaScript libraries are popular because you need them, because the main API to Python with all its prototype filtering and syntax, Java-like syntax, is a lot of overhead for the people who just want to do stuff. And if you just want to do stuff and get it done and not think about all this other stuff and get down to the purity of what you're concerned with, and then have 10 other people who are also concerned with the purity in nuanced different ways of the same problem you're facing, and choose from their libraries, which have some historically solid ones, and there's known limitations maybe in some, and some have clear superiorities but are terrible performance. There's a smattering of trade-offs that have been laid out by people who tackled the problem different ways at different times over the past 25 years or so, which is about the same as many other languages like Ruby. It's been around for about as long as Ruby, Python and Ruby. The problem is, Ruby was tied up in obscurity, being a primarily Japanese language with no driving thing, no driving force pushing the language until Rails. That 43 signals, like you shouldn't use a number in your company name like that. But the people who made Basecamp and Backpack, and DHH is the developer, created the Rails extraction of one of those projects, and that became Ruby on Rails, and that made Ruby as a language popular just about 20 years too late to attract all those scientists and NASA people and developers and business people and hobbyists and audio people and video people who had already taken up Python in that meantime. And I'm definitely going the wrong way. I want to be going down this way, but that little bridge I do recognize. Oh no, I see what I want to do. Yeah, no, I came right back out. I just go back out to the street at this point. Question is, which street? Yeah, the corner I want is that way. I do go back over the bridge. Sorry, as you bear with me as I learn my way around and map it out. It's all kind of a mystery to me right now. I'm just sort of probing, sampling, taking in the data. I don't even know what to index how, but I'm taking my pictures. And I have this walkthrough. I can always play it back and go, oh, that's where I was. Even if I don't attach geodata to this, the way AI stuff is working, I'll just say, hey, show me the path that was taken on this video, and there's going to be some library, probably free and open source, that'll just do that and give me back something that'll render in 3D, you know, with overlaid pictures that were socially shared. Everything's being connected together, and now a lot of that activity is happening under Python in machine learning and robotics and science, you know, in various aspects of business. Optimizations coming from the weirdest places, so that using MongoDB with Python is optimized for financial applications. I mean, this stuff, Monary, this stuff is like already old, ages old in Python, and the new stuff, so be fluent in Python. It's the lingua franca of tech. In the way Bash scripts were for their reign, and shall continue to be so, because it's pea in the pool of tech. And learn those things that get mixed into tech in the inextricable ways that are not inherently inaccessible through their barrier to entry. For me, the C language is absolutely that. I am not going to program in C because I like Python sufficiently that when the time comes for optimization, I'll get a C person to optimize my Python code. Hotspot optimize it in all the ways compatible, because there's API hooks between the Python world and the C world. And I will not take up Lisp as a serious primary language. I'll do it for intellectual, you know, fulfillment. I need to get free of the blub paradox, as expressed by Paul Graham. And I'll wrap this up because I think these things get chopped off at 45 minutes. Hope I'm not running late for my daughter. Let me check my other phone. Very meta, checking the time on one phone. Yeah, I am. I'm not even in a rush. So I'm starting my casual walk back. I am now at the corner I recognize as being near the temple. So you saw me get lost. You saw me find my way back. Find my way back by taking note of things, creating the database indexes the best I could as I went. It's visual, my friends. We are visual creatures, primarily. We'd have